All right, well, welcome everyone. It's truly an honor, a sacred privilege to help you optimally heal and transform even after something like this, when your child changed the world via suicide. This is the toughest of the tough. I was telling Jeff and Lynn, we were chatting before, if the toughest thing is when a child passes on, then the toughest of the tough can be when a child passes by suicide or murder, things like that. I mean, there's no easy way, really. The good news is that there are all ways to get back home, and we'll talk a lot about this. I gave part one of this topic a couple months ago, and we're working to find a link uh, to share so you can see the video, the first half. And please share those with other parents who have children who passed on by suicide. So notice my terms, by the way: children who changed worlds via suicide, children who passed on by suicide. I don't say they committed suicide because it's not a crime. And I didn't say they killed themselves because that's not possible. You realize the who and what we all are, you and your children, is so much more than this earthly body. And that's one of the reasons, or that's one of the big takeaways you can get. So I'll just go over a few things quickly that I did in the first class. I've been working in the field of suicide prevention and education since 1976. Wait a minute, that's 48 years ago. I'm only 38. Oh, well, it's that new math for you. And so my evidence for statements made in this class are from near-death experiences, life between life work based on the work of Michael Newton, PhD, what evidential mediums have had to share, philosophical views, open-minded and open-hearted religions and spirituality, wisdom sources. So again, those are the bases for my statements. So what we'll do this evening is I covered the first 5 keys in the first class. We'll cover 5 more keys about how to optimally heal and transform, and then we'll have 2 Q&A sessions. So I'm sorry for your pain and suffering. Obviously, tough, typical reactions. If you if you're not muted, please mute yourself. We're hearing some noise from somewhere. Thank you for that. Typical reactions afterwards are guilt. Parents blame themselves. If only I would have done this, I could have done that. Anger toward themselves, toward God, and one that some parents won't even let register, toward their children. And so it's okay to feel those kinds of things. Hopeless, thinking about ending this earthly experience yourself. So these are all typical reactions. But to borrow a beautiful phrase from Elizabeth Boyce-Hunt, president of HPH, there's a softer and more soulful way forward. You may want to write that down. There's a softer and more soulful way forward from this. And that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to use children a lot. I'm going to say the plural, children instead of child, and they instead of he or she, for 3 reasons. First of all, it prevents me from having to balance he and she. It avoids people, non-gender or mixed gender terms. But most of all, it honors parents who have one or more than one child who passed on. Lynn and I finished in February interviews with over 125 Shining Light parents. And we estimate that about a quarter to a third of their kids passed by suicide or overdose. It's tough to tell what was accidental and what was purposeful. And we had numerous parents with 2 kids have passed, some with 3, one with 5. So that's why I'm using the plurals. So this is a big and emotional topic. This is the beginning. We're not going to cover everything in this class. By the way, I'm willing to stay up to 90 minutes if there are enough questions. one reason this topic is so difficult is circumstances behind why the child did, how the child did, what may be part of the big picture from the soul perspective. It varies so greatly, and we'll get into that. In general, see my articles at soulproof.com, number 2, for 82 and 93 for more general information about this. Again, that's 2, 4, 82, and 93. And you can watch the video again and pull notes off of that. In addition, an article called The Great News, which is article number 19 at soulproof.com, is foundational to understanding what I'm going to be saying this evening. For example, your child is an eternal and indestructible being of energy, has an essence, a spiritual essence. Um, and so this is an opportunity, tough it is, to realize more who you are and who your children really are, not just, that earthly package you saw. It turns out, this is based on scientific evidence, that the earthly form, what we see when we look at somebody, is much less than 1% of who and what they really are. And the great news is all of that continues to exist. Your children's intelligence, love, sense of humor, preferences, being in contact, relationship, memories, etc. So it's important to focus on this great news. Another one of the pieces of great news that, again, has much scientific, clinical, and/or firsthand experience evidence behind it is that you and your children are integral parts of the one right now. In other words, religions haven't done a very good job, but what we understand now about reality is that we each are integral parts of Source, of God, Creator, whatever you want to call it. And that's not maybe someday if you do or believe the right things. That's the way life is set up. So that's great news. Another, that your connection with your child is sacred and eternal. So although your child, see, you two are playing a role during this earthly experience. First of all, probably only about 40% of your energy was manifested for him or her as a child, for you as a parent. So not even all of your energy is involved in this earthly play. But in this play, you agreed on some level, okay, they'll play the child, you'll play the parent. But really, your roles are much greater than that. That's just a limited way of interacting. But you two will interact over time in eternal ways and much more expansive and beautiful ways than you can likely imagine. So that gives you an idea of some of the great news. Again, article number 19. Now, for the first 5 keys that I mentioned, I'll just read the title and then you can watch the video later if you weren't with us. Number 1, suicide is not an unforgivable sin. Secondly, you will see them again. We just talked about that. Next, they don't receive external judgment or punishment. Those are human traits, not the way God and angels and so on work. Next, they were lovingly tended to after their bodily death, if they needed it. As we'll discuss, in some cases, suicide might have been the very best way forward. But if they were beat up or, in pain in any way, hampered, they will receive R&R, counseling, healing showers, soul group work before they enter the mainstream. Number 5, they didn't really want to hurt you or anyone. So many of the suicide notes say the same thing. I'm sorry, I just couldn't handle it anymore. So they did the best they could given their physical and/or mental, emotional, spiritual state at the time. So those are 5 really important keys. So at that point, we'll resume now with part 2 of this class. And by the way, I'll go over 2 of these and then we'll have time for some questions. So if you have them, write them down. I prefer that parents ask their questions instead of typing them in. That way we can have a little back and forth much better. I mentioned the free articles at soulproof.com. And the next part, I'm going to mention some books and some audio products. And I'm not advertising. I charge very little for these. And for people who can't afford them, we'll send free digital copies. Just email me, mark@soulproof.com. And that's on the websites. All right. So first of all, it's important to understand, and some of you have had evidential medium sessions. Some of you have had after-death communications where they talk to you while you're awake or asleep. So you have an idea of what they're trying to communicate. But if they could talk to you right now, or rather, see, I'm still learning how to talk about these things. They are talking to you, there's no doubt about it. If you could hear them, here's what they'd be saying. Mom, Dad, please don't worry about me. I'm alive and well. You know, no one can be killed. Soul, spirit, energy is indestructible. I love you. I want to have a continued relationship. We'll see each other again. I'm in a realm characterized by love, peace, joy, gratitude, light. And the more you can choose that day by day, it may be tough if you're in a lot of darkness right now, but the more, if you can just focus on one more positive thing, the more you get on their wavelength and are able to perceive their presence, probably right beside you some of the time. So these are some of the things that they would say to you. Please don't be guilty, don't be sad, move on with your life, because none of us can really understand the big picture of life. As I've said many times, most of us are looking through a tiny pinhole and trying to understand, what makes sense or why things don't make sense. So they are in a realm with a less obstructed view of reality. So they're seeing more of the big picture of life. They understand more. And someday you two will have a reunion and talk about it and laugh about it and cry about it and say, okay, now I understand more why this happened. Until then, focus on the things we're talking about. And by the way, article number 9 and my facilitated after death contact session are the best ways for you to perceive your kids now till soul phone devices are available. And that facilitated ADC technique is definitely on the Helping Parents Heal website under YouTube videos or webinars. The next thing to remember is they were mentally and or emotionally imbalanced or too sensitive or in severe pain in body, mind, and spirit, or just ready to move on. There's all sorts of possibilities why they made that choice. So again, tough, difficult to understand, but if you can just get a little sense, a little glimpse that there is a rhyme and a reason behind it. For example, today, in 2024, so much of our food, air, and water is polluted. Our food, even if a person eats a healthy diet most of the time, which many people don't, especially young people, the food doesn't have nutrients in it now because its topsoil is depleted. And that's why it's so important to have organic, because it's healthier. So in addition, chemicals, heavy metals are ubiquitous. I saw a study that said the average baby is born with over 250 chemicals in its bloodstream. Wow, talk about a strike against you. So guess what organ is the most sensitive and the most affected by these nutritional deficiencies on one hand and excess chemicals and heavy metals on the other? The brain. And so that's part of why the thinking of young people so often goes awry. Suicide is the #2 cause of death in young people now, and I think the number is 15 to 35. It's just unbelievable. It's talk about a pandemic, and it needs to be addressed. So your child was not alone. There are many kids like it, and to a large part, they couldn't help it. It wasn't under their control, or maybe totally wasn't under the control. So we who are more informed, and balanced can heal ourselves, our planet, to prevent more suicides. In other words, create more meaning, prevent other kids from doing this by making a difference. And the two best books to read about that, Radiant Wellness, my book, and Greater Reality Living by Dr. Gary Schwartz, myself. I don't get into politics and talks, but there actually is a presidential candidate this year who's totally aware of these issues and the need to address these and stop this onslaught of kids dying and the kids' mental health problems and so on. So that's hopeful. The next point, as I mentioned, the reasons for and the circumstances behind suicide vary greatly. For example, let's just talk about kind of two ends of the spectrum. One would be an impulsive decision. This is a pretty happy and healthy kid. I mean, nobody's perfect. Their life is good. They love their parents. They're doing well in school. But maybe their first love breaks up with them. Or maybe they got some bad news or got rejected from the college of their choice. And then they go out and maybe, take some drugs or drink. And in a moment, they make an impulsive decision that if they could take it back, they may well. We've been told that I know some parents have been told by 3 or 4 evidential mediums independently, your child's feeling some remorse. He said if he could do it over again, he would. He's sorry, acted impulsively. He messed up. Well, guess what? We all mess up. And that's one of the many beautiful things about knowing that life is eternal. And God, Creator, is truly understanding and loving and caring. Because when we mess up in some ways, what we break an arm or hurt, like for me, I messed up. I was a true blonde, very fair skin. I was out in the sun a lot, way too much as in my youth. Well, now I have skin damage. I pay for it, but it's not forever. Someday I'll have a new head, hopefully with more hair. Well, same with your kids. It's not a forever, torment or punished by it in any way, no punishment. And they'll learn from it, just like I learned about the sun. And it's actually, you may say, well, Mark, that's not a fair comparison. Well, actually it is, because we all make mistakes. We all learn in different ways. And the nice thing is that since life is eternal, you have forever to get it right. So that's one end of the spectrum, impulsive decision. Another is we have evidence that some children pre-planned with their parents, because you realize you need a cast and crew to pull off this movie, this book, this play that seems like an earthly experience. Why would a soul volunteer to do that? To try to wake up humanity. I mean, how many kids have to pass on, or how many kids' bodies have to pass on by suicide before enough people awaken and say, what in the heck is going on? We need to do something about it. We need to do something now. And that will save many people in our planet, or help many people on our planet. So keep in mind, these are evolved souls, which means they don't have to do the whole Earth school thing. They only need to live 90 years. They didn't even need to come to Earth. They're beyond that. But out of love, they volunteered to come here, pretend to be a child, and then go through all that. There's a universal law that for every tragedy and for all the pain, there's an equal or even greater amount of blessings and opportunity from it. And so that's why it's one of the biggest keys to look for the silver lining, resolve to helping others, to creating meaning for your kids. And then that's when it helps you heal, but it helps create meaning behind this. So some ways to understand what I was just talking about more is the article number 25 entitled, Did My Soul Really Plan All This? And use the pre-birth planning technique, which again, I've given several times to helping parents heal, and it's on a YouTube video recording. The next point, and then we'll have some questions. Don't worry about their soul. Some, depending on what religion you're brought up in, you may hear, got to save your soul, and save it from what? The soul is another way to put it, energy, life force. And so one trouble I have with soul, even though my book's called Soul Proof, and working with the Soul Phone Project, is because it's such a well-established term, is that it's got these heavily anchored religious terms. So no one's soul needs to be saved because it's not lost. But sometimes we need to be wakened up. We need to remember the big picture. We need to remember what game we're playing here. So you don't have to worry about their soul. From an earthly viewpoint, it can seem like a horrible, hopeless thing. From a cosmic perspective, it was their way back home. For whatever reason, they chose that. So I'll just emphasize again, because I was involved in a fundamentalist church in my youth for the greatest of all reasons, because my girlfriend was. And man, a couple of years of that just about drove me crazy, because it's so fear-filled and so hateful. Somebody passes by suicide, that's a slap in the face of God. That's an unforgivable sin. And I'm like, what? Are they stupid? First of all, God didn't have God's not a big guy in the sky. Secondly, God doesn't take offense at some such things. God understands. God and angels and the heavenly host, they react with caring and love, not punishment and judgment, as the book A Course in Miracles says. God doesn't forgive because she didn't condemn in the first place. And using the pronoun she, by the way, for God, can solve a lot of problems, because when you're using the archaic Greek and Roman depictions, big guy in the sky and on the throne, long white hair and beard, judging, smiting, like the Old Testament talks about, well, it's easy to understand some of these horrible accusations made to the Supreme. But when you just slip in there, she, her, mother God, what mother would act like that? So I think, and the last thing I'll say about that is, don't worry about your kids having to do it all over again. I've had some parents say, well, I understand that if somebody passes by suicide, they have to come back and do it all over again. And what if I'm not here to help my child? Well, you don't have to. That's a misnomer too. So much of what has been taught about death and the afterlife is just plain wrong. And so many of those concepts truly come from the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the 14th century, or even earlier. For example, I was just talking about the Roman and Greek depictions of God. Those date back to as far as 1800 BC, before Christ, before the Common Era. Hello, that's almost 4,000 years ago. So in what other topic do we rely on what people believed 4,000 years ago? Well, we shouldn't on this one. So no, they have a choice. They don't have to come back and do it all over again. However, some souls will choose to after, maybe 1,000 years in the really real place, which can seem like, I don't know, 100 years here on Earth. Time varies. So you don't have to worry about that one. But if they do come back, it's likely that since you two are primary soulmates, and I use that term in the sense that most of us have about 25 primary soulmates and a larger number of secondary and tertiary ones, you may well volunteer to be a support system person, and maybe their child, or maybe their sibling, or maybe their parent again. The roles can be changed around. And to learn more about that, you don't have to worry about your child's soul. See Articles number 13, What is God Really Like? Number 15, The Nature of Humans, and number 107, The Afterlife. So with that, let's entertain some questions. I'm already getting tired of hearing myself talk. So just raise your hand, and thank you for those laughs, Patty. By the way, I do try to crack some jokes, usually not very good, but one reason is we need to laugh. The French philosopher Voltaire said, God is like a comedian playing to an audience that's too afraid to laugh. Because, most people believe we can die. That's not true. We can't. Just this earthly shell. And that turns out to be as important as the sweater you wore when you were in fourth grade, that we can lose our loved ones. You can't. Love is eternal. And that we're separate from God, which we're not. We're all part of that. It's all sacredly interconnected. So that's one reason you got to stop and laugh, because we're just walking around. We don't even understand the nature of reality. Okay. Questions, raise your hand physically or via the Zoom.
Patty, laughing Patty. You had a question in the chat room. You want to unmute and ask your question?
I did, and actually you referenced something when you know you've gotten it right. How do you know when you've gotten it right? As far as the soul living in this particular um experience.
Say more about what you mean by how do you know you've gotten it right? Gotten it right in what way?
Well, I was just paraphrasing from something you had said earlier during your talk about when you know you've gotten it right. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the context.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
Um,
okay. It's okay. And thank you for being the first person to be brave enough to ask a question. So first of all, it's a process, definitely. It's called the journey of awakening, because it can take a long time. But I guess ultimately, you've gotten it right when you don't have to come to Earth anymore. And when you are so enlightened, you realize you are one with the one. And that's when your consciousness could merge with the consciousness of the divine. So until then, it happens in stages. Some of the best signs are that you have more peace and joy, and you're out there helping others. I Some of my dearest friends right now are parents and helping parents heal, because they are some of the most incredible people on the planet. I mean, I've had 4 gurus since I was 21, and spent time with all these meditators and all this. Um, but these people are so enlightened, and it's because, not despite of, but because they had children who passed on. And they said, okay, I'm going to understand this. Why did this happen? I'm going to do whatever it takes to be in touch with my child. And they are forces of nature. They are forces of love. And see, I have a world perspective, because I think it's really possible in the next 10 years to turn our world around. And could it be that part of the reason your children passed was to help that as well? Because let's face it, when life is easy, we're like, dude, oh, what's on TV tonight? You know, but when it hits the fan, that's when we ask the tough questions and search deeply and reach down and realize who we are and why we're here.
Can I take that one step further? And do you believe that we have a choice once we've reached that point where we've gotten it right? Can we stand back and wait for our loved ones to reach that point as well?
That's the information that arises. I mentioned Michael Newton, PhD, founder of Life Between Lives Therapy. His first 2 books are Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. I read all his books 4 times, which I've never done any other author. So Michael Newton. By the way, I interviewed him on my radio show. If you go to soulproof.com and at the top radio shows, you can listen to him and others, Wayne Dyer and others I interviewed to learn more. But yes, we live in a free will universe. So the thing is, keep in mind, forever is, well, forever. That's a long time. So
Right.
while from our viewpoint, like, I'm never going back there. Well, after you've been back in, the really real place, whatever you want to call it, for 1,000 years, like, okay, I think I'm ready for another adventure. You could look at it differently. And the other thing is to remember that multi-location factor, that not all of who and what we are is embodied in this earthly experience. So that's a really important, because you and your child may well be together right now in another time, space slice of life, saying, wow, mom was the first one to volunteer, and your child's like, go mom, you rock. And that's happening just as real at the same time, simultaneously, as this earthly scenario.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the questions, and kudos for understanding, because this is heavy stuff. I mean, I'm sharing as deeply as I can, and you're not even blinking an eye.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey for me so far.
Yeah. MJ, you're up next.
Am I muted?
Not now.
Okay, hi.
Hello.
How are you? So my Grace left us 18 months ago, and I think I've been able to really expand my knowledge and my soul. The compassion and the love has increased. How I interact daily has completely changed with every interaction I have. But I cannot get to the point where I can find joy. Yeah, I'm finding it really tricky because there's just always the heaviness of the absence of her, and the guilt. So I was wondering if you've got any good advice for reaching for some joy.
Of course. First of all, serve others. That's one of the biggest ways to feel joy. Number two, take time for what are called centering practices. And I'm looking up so I can give you the article numbers. And that's number 77, article number 7. So taking time to basically turn down or turn off your brain, because joy is really who we are. We've talked about how we're beings of energy. And so is our energy loving, joyful, peaceful, grateful, or is it depressed, angry, resentful, etc.? So joy isn't just something you want to feel, it's how you want to be. So centering practices, the next thing I recommend is it's called Ask Your Soul technique. And that is article number 71. And there's a technique so that you can turn down or turn off your brain, get in touch with your real self, your higher self, get in touch with your angels and guides, master teachers, and the light. And you can ask that very question: how can I feel more joy? As well as, how can I deepen my spiritual path? How can I become more healthy and whole? How can I improve relationships? And then I leave a few minutes silence after each one, so you can let those answers pop up, float in, instead of your brain trying to think about it. And the last thing I would say did you say Grace?
Yes,
Yeah, what a beautiful name. 18 months ago?
yes.
Yeah, so that's not very long. And that's that's kind of early for joy, even among the most impressive of parents. So, give yourself some space from that. But the fact that you're asking about it, setting an intention, seeking it is really impressive at this point. But the last thing I would say is, and I'm getting teared up before I even say it, which is one of my signs that I'm spot on, is do it for joy, do it for grace, because you can bet when you're feeling more joyful, she is going to be cheering and applauding, and not that your sadness hurts her in any meaningful way, but she's aware of how you feel. So let her be aware of mom being more joyful. There's there's something to focus on.
Thank you. Yes.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Looks like Christy has a question. Christy, you want to unmute?
I do. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Mark. I
Hello.
lost my son, hello, Maddox, going on 10 months ago. And I've been doing a lot of reading and watching podcasts, and everything you're saying, I'm completely resonating with on what I've been researching. My question for you is around soul planning. So if we plan this out, because I actually find comfort in the idea of thinking that he was sort of like, hey, mom, I'm going to do this for you. And because of how much it's changed me since he passed, and his dad. But if we agree to these ideas before we come to earth, but then we go through the veil, so essentially we forget what our plans are. Is it our angels and our spirit guides, are they the ones that are sort of guiding us to stay on track to what we agreed to before we came here, since we essentially go through the veil to sort of forget the other side? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and thank you for asking it. So definitely read article number 25. I think it's like 25 pages long. So difficult.
Okay.
I contacted Suzanne Giesman and Bill Guggenheim and Dr. Schwartz, Raymond Moody, the top names. And basically, all of them said, we don't know for sure, or what they did say, they didn't agree with each other. So
Okay.
that's why I go with Michael Newton, so much of his research. Keep in mind that pre-birth planning is just that, planning. It's not set in stone. Otherwise, there wouldn't be free will. I mean, why go through the dance if it's all predetermined? So it's more setting up possibilities, potentials. Go through the veil, forget. Yeah, to various degrees, but if that's really the soul's planning, it will come up in different ways. And there's some evidence that there are pre-planned symbols, reminders, people we meet that kind of remind us, even on a subconscious level, oh, okay, it's getting to that point. Some people have trouble believing that something like suicide or murder are ever pre-planned, but I discuss those in length, and I think in special cases, for good reasons, it could be. In other words, in heaven, in the realms of light, something negative and horrible is planned. But if there's a greater reason for it, then perhaps that would be planned. Like I mentioned, enough of these kids pass this way that people are forced to wake up and say, we're going to quit destroying our planet. So I feel like there's another point in there I didn't address. So repeat it, please.
I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, and I'll check out the article.
Okay. Anything else on that?
Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. You're welcome.
Looks like we have Monica. Monica, is it possible for you to turn your camera on so we can see you? There you are. Hi. And go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Monica.
I don't know if you remember me,
You look familiar.
and you sound familiar, thank goodness. But just a little history. I'm at my mother's. My living son, but Jason was suicide December 1st, 2020. Mark, did you hear me?
Yes.
We're coming on 4 years. 4.
Mm-hmm.
But I have worked so hard doing what you describe and never quite get there. And it's not really a question, and maybe it's inappropriate. But I'm at my mother's and she's 100. Jason was 22.
Mm-hmm.
But the living son, I think, is interesting. Sean is 33. I'm 66. And 33 years from me is my mom. I just think that's interesting. 33 years between, but I'll never know why Jason left, but you said perfect storm and it clicked. You were spot right on.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect storm. And what you're talking about with food. So, all these words. And I'm trying to summarize, but I'm working with Sean. He moved away. He's home. He's working 2 jobs. I helped him start a company. I know it's too much detail. I shouldn't even say that.
Well, let me address there, because you brought up some important points.
What one?
First of all, you said twice my living son, but you realize Jason's also your living son. He's just not living on Earth.
Do. And today in the meeting, I didn't even mention Jason. He's with me 24/7.
Good.
He is living. I feel him. Yes.
Okay. So, Monica, the goal is to help you heal and transform. So I'm going to lovingly say, you're having visits, then tell your voice to say the right words. In other words, even though you may know it, if you say, like, I lost him, he left us,
Right.
my living son, all those
Right.
words reinforce the false ideas.
I know. It's repetition.
Yeah,
My mom was a teacher and I'm a teacher, and I just got to repeat it because I forget.
Yeah. Well, that's why.
But you're right.
Yeah. And that's why, darling, I've created a holistic program for you, because if you'll watch these 2 videos,
Which
watch
one?
them. Well, this one and the first part that we did, that hopefully Lynn will come up with the link before the end of this and share it.
Okay.
Or I'll ask Elizabeth to put it on Facebook tomorrow. So if you watch those 2 classes, and if you watch them 2 and 3 times, make notes, and read the articles, use the techniques. Like I say, if you can't find them or if you can't afford them, we'll send you free ones.
I got the brief one, but I'm a busybody. I can't sit myself down to do I meditate, it's ridiculous. I'm just, an exercise bunny. But what I'm getting to say, the 33-year-old son isn't eating good. I see the similar pattern about the food. I'm organic, and he's choosing to work 4 10-hour days, and he's starting an LLC, and I'm supporting him. But what he said is, Mom, when you leave, I know you'll be around. I'm so obsessed. And anyway, what I'm saying about the food and our condition, and my brother has a PhD, and we have
okay, dear. Hey, dear. I'm going to have to rein you in here a little bit because we have some other questions. But you're younger than me. You're younger than me, so it's true that you can teach. Listen up. You can teach old dogs new tricks. So you say, "Well, I'm a busybody." Well, then that's part of your training here. To take
lead a horse to water, but won't drink the vitamin.
Yeah. So read the articles, use the techniques, and let me know how you're doing in 90 days. Okay.
Well, which one? Which articles?
The ones that I mentioned in these classes. Today's class.
Oh, I wrote it
in the first class.
25.
Yeah. Just give it 90 days and see the difference, and let me know how that feels. All right, we
Thank
got to
you.
run. Take care.
You are
You can do it.
you. Thank you.
All right.
Amen. I'll shut up.
Maybe one more question and then we'll move on to the rest of the class. Or maybe we're ready to move on now. Is Monica? Help me out here, Lynn. I'm floundering.
Okay, so we just spoke to Monica. Thank you, Monica.
Okay.
and
Why
lower
don't we
your
go
hand.
ahead and continue on and then we'll take more questions. So we're back to, we're at key number 8. Don't hold yourself accountable. In other words, yes, you were the parents in this earthly experience, but this earthly experience is a blink of an eye on the span of eternity. And so you're not, well, let me put this carefully. You will always be the parent of your child or children in a special way. That doesn't end. And at the same time, you two have lots of other roles that you've fulfilled and will throughout eternity. So don't think that you're totally accountable for what happened to your child. And I know that's tough. I have a couple children. I understand how that feels. And that's part of the reason for this bigger picture of life view. So you can understand that bottom line, your child is an eternal soul. He or she had their own agenda, oftentimes which we can't see from that limited earthly perspective. And so hopefully that will help you become less encumbered by guilt, feeling responsible, should have, would have, could have. And 2 ways to help achieve that, and this is for you, Monica, and everybody, the holistic breathing technique, which I've done for helping parents heal, and that's on a video. And then also the love, acceptance, and forgiveness technique. And that's loving, accepting, and forgiving others as well as yourself. So these techniques are so powerful, again, because they use guided imagery, but they turn down the brain because the brain thinks it understands what's going on. But actually, the brain perceives less than 1% of reality. So that's why you need to turn down your brain once in a while. And that's the importance of walking in nature or serving others, playing with pets, the different centering practices that help you remember, as the old saying is, be still, know I am God. Know you are part of God. Know that God is not asleep at the wheel, that there's a rhyme and a reason to this, even though your brain can drive itself crazy trying to figure it out. Next key, don't be ashamed. It's time to drop this stigma about suicide. Again, how they changed worlds is just one small part of the totality of their life. It's kind of like skin color. I was lucky enough to grow up in a part of town where we had all sorts of people from all sorts of different colors. And I grew up, it's no big deal. I didn't even think about it. And yet some people are still racist, or some people still focus, well, he has brown skin, he has yellow. So what? It's such a minor thing about the totality of the person. Well, in the same way, how a person changed worlds, that doesn't define their lives. That's just one small detail about it. So don't be ashamed. If you have family, quote, family or friends who are judgmental about this, I mean, you wouldn't believe the letters I get from people. They're like, they're, oh my God. I mean, again, I'm laughing a little to keep from screaming. Like one mom, her son passed by suicide. And the minister, she'd been going to this church for a long time, just said, well, he's going to be in hell forever. He chose his path. I'm like, oh, way to be a great minister there, bub. He's not a minister. And family and friends who would be judgmental or who ignore you, who aren't there for you, they're not really good family and friends. So many of these more shining light parents have said, our whole team of friends has shifted because we found people who get it, who are more evolved and informed. So again, it's a great way to upgrade your inner circle of people. However, there's one caveat about that you need to consider, and that is your family and friends who maybe don't say anything, don't know what to say, maybe avoid you. They might be so uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. And so if you think that's the case, if they're educatable, then do so. Educatable, is that even a word? Try to educate them. Share these articles, like article number 4, when a loved one passes by suicide. Try to educate them about it, and so you can still remain family and friends. Now, here's a story, a true story that gives you an idea of the bigger view of things. A person named Don, who's about 75 years old, emailed me a few months ago and said, I just want to thank you for my cousin. He said, let me back up, he said, and I forget the cousin's name. Let's just call him Tom. Don and Tom were like brothers, even though they're cousins. And Tom passed by heroin, by using heroin. And, and again, it's hard to tell whether it's accidental or purposeful, but he OD'd when he was like 18 years old. Well, Don was able, because Don has some clair abilities. And so Don has been in touch with his cousin who passed like 60 years ago during dreams, during waking visits. They have an ongoing relationship. Well, Don had just received, for people who sign up for my free Soul Proof newsletter, they get a weekly article. I have 121 of them now. And Don had just received the one on suicide. And Don read it. And that night in a dream, his cousin came to him and said, Don, please thank Mark for publishing that. He said, even though I've been in, quote, spirit world, the other side, for 60 years, I still get down on myself sometimes for doing that. And he said, you reading that article allowed me to absorb it, and it helped me heal here in the afterlife. And Don told me that, and I was like, gosh, just when you think you understand it all. So things we say and do here on earth not only help ourselves and others, but people in other realms of existence. So that's one of the many reasons why it's so important. Don't be ashamed. Don't blame yourself. Let's talk about it. Let's get this out in the open. Let's find the silver linings, which leads me to the 10th and last point, which is you can learn and grow from this. Just today, Elizabeth again mentioned we're putting together this book, from Shining Light Parent Interviews, called Shining Light Parents Speak. And in her forward, Elizabeth used the term find the collateral beauty. And I had never heard that term, but then I forgot it's the name of a movie with Will Smith, whose daughter passed, A Collateral Beauty. Because, you mostly hear collateral damage, like war, and, civilians get killed. But I immediately, of course, went with it to go with collateral blessings. So we can find the collateral blessings. So obviously, from a more negative viewpoint, from a more earthbound viewpoint, you could say, well, we're the collateral damage from our child choosing suicide. Or you can make a shift and say, we are going to find the collateral blessings. And we're going to, you just heard from a couple of moms here who said how much they've learned and grown since their child passed. So we are going to find the blessings. We're going to use them to improve every aspect of our life, to help others, and make our world a better place. That's the view I recommend. And that's the view that is the right way. When you say, when you're doing the right thing. It's not easy, but it's possible. So if you can awaken to the big picture of life, even after something like this, and change the way you live, remembering all these things we've talked about, all the great news, again, number Article 19, those are eternal lessons. Those are eternal transformations, which means you take them with you. You know the old saying, you can't take it with you when you die, referring to your house and car and such. But what you do take with you is your degree of love, your degree of awareness, your consciousness. And so you take that with you. And also who you are, your energy, affects everyone who's around you. You know, the old saying, who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. And especially over the last 10 years or so, I've had so many people say, Mark, I love what you write. I love what you say, but just your presence, like just your energy, just your consciousness is so healing and comforting. Well, think how wonderful that is. So you can be the same way. So some suggestions for doing what we just talked about: read my article number 89 on prayer, and I share my prayers that I do twice a day, which is a way of talking to God, setting your intentions, conscious intention, focusing on what you want. Then meditation and yoga, article number 51, centering practices, where I mentioned article 77. Attending spiritual centers, that could be at your church, but more enlightened religious or spiritual centers, article number 16, serving others. Finding more evolved relationships. If you're a more evolved or advanced soul, then it's very helpful to have kindred spirits around, people who are on the same wavelength. And so that's why I wrote this article number 66, how to locate those people, places I've found that they frequent, so you can meet them and expand your group of people who get you and you get them. Because many people who are more advanced feel alone. You know, they feel like they can't share what they believe or what they've experienced with others. So it's important to have a circle. And of course, being a part of helping parents heal with local groups, the online groups, talking, caring listeners, that's a wonderful way, because there are so many awakening people in that group. And then finally, the ask your soul technique, which I mentioned to one of the parents. Okay, that's enough talking. And now more questions.
Megan had a question. Do you want to unmute yourself, Megan, and ask your question? We can't hear you yet. Megan. Well, I don't know if she's having problems. I'll ask her question for her.
Okay, I think it just worked.
Okay,
There we
great.
go.
Sorry. My question was, I believe you went over this and I must have missed it, regarding the correct term to use to convey that your child died by suicide. I believe you said, don't say left us, or
Well,
that's,
first, yeah, thank you for asking. First of all, there's no correct term. These are suggestions. But one way would be to say he or she passed on by suicide, changed worlds via suicide. Or, you don't have to say how, passed on. And then if the conversation gets to that point, in other words, you can focus on, and Megan, if you can unmute yourself and say something, I can see you instead of, I've got laughing Patty back here with me. You can focus on the good news, like, will my child graduate from Earth School? So these sayings are kind of cumbersome, but they're much more accurate in explaining what really happened, versus some of the other more crude ones. Any other questions or comments about that, Megan?
The other question I had was, I have had several medium readings, and I think one or two, perhaps, someone has said that my son Nolan was an immature, I believe the term was immature soul, or it kind of indicating to me that everything was new to him, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Well, that may or may not be the case. Keep in mind that the ability of mediums ranges greatly, and even the best mediums have bad days, off days, and maybe at best are 80% accurate. So we have to take what you hear from others with a grain of salt, first of all. But certainly there are lots of, say, young souls, immature souls, beginner souls. I've mentioned Michael Newton a lot from his studies, and they've had now 55,000 clients from something like 35 different countries. So they've been able to map out a lot what it's like in the realms before Earth. And he said approximately 85% of people on Earth embody beginner souls. And there's no hierarchy, there's no judgment, it's just the way it is. They're either younger than as they became created more recently, or they haven't focused yet on the major points of life. And then he says another 12 to 13% are intermediate souls, and then 2 or 3% more advanced. So even if your child is a more immature soul or beginner soul, there's no nothing to be embarrassed about that. And that would be the kind of soul that may do something impulsively without thinking it through. Do you want to share more details and go deeper in that, or no?
My son was 18, and also in a couple of the medium sessions, he said he made a mistake. So kind of what you're saying is definitely resonating as far as snap decision, or
Right.
didn't think it through, because I had zero warning. I just couldn't believe that it happened.
Well, I'm very sorry. That is tough. 2 points. When I was 21 years old, or actually 20, my first love, we'd gone together 4 years, broke up with me. And I was driving home on a highway, and I was in such pain and shock. I just momentarily thought, you know what? I could just drive my car into a bridge abutment and end this right now. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And, I mourned for a long time over her. But I understand that impulse. And if things had been a little different, I was sober, but if I had been drinking or something, using some drugs, I might have said, yeah, I'm going to do that. Hell with it. So well, I understand it very much. Shoot, what was my second point? And that is this: even though your son might have regretted it and said, yeah, I made a mistake, and this came to you through a medium, keep in mind that's his self-judgment. He's not being punished by anyone. He's not being looked down or put down by anyone. It's kind of like, the more we learn, especially through the Soul Phone Project, the more I see that the afterlife is not so different from life on Earth. I mean, how do we feel when we make a mistake on Earth? Dang, I did it again. Why didn't I see that coming? I should have thought that through more. Well, it's the same way with people who pass on. they go through that for a little while, but it's not forever, and it's something they bounce back and learn from, and then do better the next time, hopefully.
Thank you. It was also the beginning stages of COVID. So I think combined with not being able to see your friends, not being able to finish, school, being on Zoom and everything else, I think it was the perfect storm, as others have said, unfortunately.
Yeah, and people can have been exposed to the virus and be asymptomatic, and one of the more common symptoms of COVID infection are what they call COVID psychosis, where the brain just doesn't work right. And I've heard all kinds of screwy stories during that period of time. So that could have been a factor as well. So hopefully it helps you, have more peace and acceptance about it, and then set about finding the rest of the story and making it a happy one.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Sandy has a question. Sandy, can you unmute and maybe turn your camera on so we can see you, please?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh, here. Do I have to do that? Oh, there it is.
Thank you.
I can't believe that's me, first of all. Anyway, my question is, and thank you for this. This is the first session I've ever attended. It's been 27 months since our daughter transitioned. Her name was Amy, is Amy. Anyway, I've been trying to have her come to me in my dreams, and I ask, every night in my prayers, and I don't understand why she's not coming to me in my dreams.
Well, you just answered your own question. She's coming to you, it's just you can't receive her. Remember we talked about, and this is no criticism or judgment, but there you are, crying. You're obviously so deeply sad. She's coming from love, peace, joy. It's like radios. If you're trying to listen to FM 105, but your dial's on AM 98, you're not going to hear FM 105. So she's trying to get through you, Mom, I'm still here. I love you. I'm still alive, but you're just so sad. And I understand that. So here's why I recommend 3 steps. First of all, use what's called holistic breathing technique. It's described in article number 70, and it's 45 minutes of deep, noisy, diaphragmatic breathing. Again, this is on the Helping Parents Heal website, so you don't have to buy with all kind of music in the background, me coaching. And what this will do is allow you to really grieve. I've been using this for 25 years. And when I first started using it, I had all this accumulated grief. And I cried so hard. And yes, I'm saying this on a recording. I had snot running down my face. Now that's crying. And this will allow you to really release that deep, deep grief. You might as well get it out. Number 1. Number 2, read article number 28, which is about after-death communications. So you can understand more how common they are and how post-material persons, those who have passed on, often come through. Raymond Moody did a survey and found that about 75% of, quote, bereaved parents, we call them shining light parents now, have had one or more meaningful experiences, perceptions of their kids while awake or asleep. Actually, I've spoken to thousands and thousands of parents now over the last 10 years especially, and I've found that number is almost 100%. So if you haven't had, you're going to have really soon, the way you're going after this. The next article is number 9, which I mentioned before, facilitated after-death contact, and then use that technique. But do the holistic breathing for about a month first, because as long as you're in deep grief, you may not have a successful perception. But once you've gone through that grieving, then I think you'll notice you're able to detect your beloved Amy a lot better. And then cultivate this different but very real relationship with her now until you pass on and you two have a really wonderful reunion. Any questions about that, dear one?
Thank you. I wrote all of that down.
Okay, and one more thing. I ask you to email me, again, mark@soulproof.com, MARK @soul, proof, PROOF.com,
Okay.
in about 90 days, and let me know how you're doing, because we may need to add something else at that point, but we'll find out.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And by the way, that goes to all of you parents, because I literally can address your biggest questions and toughest challenges in 10 minutes, maybe less, because I have all these templates and everything set up. So email me. My responses will be brief, but they'll be information laden. And the only thing I ask is get back with me in 90 days so we can see how you're doing and what needs to be adjusted at that point.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question they'd like to share? Oh, looks like TJ does. Can you go ahead and unmute?
I don't know that it's as much of a question as a comment about upgrading language when we're talking about the way our children transitioned. I've been really working hard to upgrade my language, and I love that we are moving that awful C word out the door when it comes to the way our children left this world. But I had, especially when Megan was asking some things, I have been working a little bit with the mental health community and NAMI and how we can help destigmatize how our children are leaving. And I just wanted to suggest, maybe, is it possible, or have we considered that it was a fatal mental health crisis, or their mental condition was terminal? The suicide is so laden with stigmatization and criminality, and you've got suicide bombers, and you've got people who are shooting a lot of people and then ending their lives. And we've got some children who are just in a really tough place in a mental health crisis. And that mental health crisis has become terminal, like cancer becomes terminal, or a heart attack. We don't see it, and then it hits, and they didn't survive it.
Yeah, first of all, wow, I'm really getting some feedback there. Maybe mute yourself now, TJ, if that continues. First of all, kudos for exploring new language. My first resistance to that term, though, like a terminal mental health condition, is that it can be reversed. So much of, as I mentioned, this, I was a clinical psychologist, so I did talk therapy for years. And then I became a doctor of chiropractic and a clinical nutritionist. And I treated so many more cases of depression, anxiety, phobias, OCD, ADD, ADHD, you name it, than I ever did as a psychologist. And how I was talking to them some, but mostly what I mentioned before, we're getting rid of the heavy metals and chemicals, and we're giving them real nutrients, real B vitamins, not this one a day crap, not synthetic, but from whole foods. And boom, watch them turn around, especially kids. So I hate for people to think that it's normal or inevitable for someone to pass by suicide, because that can be turned around. I've seen it with so many patients, and I go to conventions with thousands of doctors, and they all have many patients the same. So it's possible. It's what I'd rather focus on is how we do that. And that's why I mentioned my book, Radiant Wellness. I mentioned different things in these articles. So I like getting rid of the C word. I assume you mean commit. I agree, and definitely don't want to say kill themselves. You couldn't kill yourself if you tried, but I'd rather not go the route that you mentioned for those reasons. Anything else you want to say there?
Do you have language that can help destigmatize that for those of us who are out when we're not in this nice container and we're in the real world, where someone can say that their person died because the cancer wasn't caught soon enough and it became terminal, or the heart attack, it just happened. What can we use to help put us into a more normal type? I say normal because these other sorts of passings are more readily accepted than what we have to carry for our beloved children.
Yeah, and I understand. Yeah, if you can mute again. Yeah, and I understand more your way of thinking about this. Yeah, it is partly a matter of not catching it in time with suicide. And so often the person who has suicidal thoughts thinks they have to suffer in silence, or they're too embarrassed to tell anyone. So how to destigmatize that and get the word out? I mean, that's a huge thing, education, and lots of people feel this way. It's so common to have suicidal thoughts. It's another thing to attempt with a high means of lethality. So I agree, if we can catch it sooner, there's no magic wand, definitely. I'd say we each do what we can. I feel like I've just kind of hit my stride and putting together everything I've done throughout my life. So that's certainly one of the topics I want to address. Stop this young person suicide addiction and so on. So everyone, all hands on deck for that one, definitely.
Thank you, TJ. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like for Mark?
Am I wearing them out?
I think you might be. That was a lot of very helpful information, Mark. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Again, email me, mark@soulproof.com, in any way I can help. I put together that holistic program. It's tried and proven. Put it to use, and then we'll see what else is needed later. So take care, you all. Find the blessings, let it shine. God bless.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Hey, Cheryl. Unmute for a minute. Oh, we can't hear you.
Have a good session with Mark, Lynn. Tell him I said hello.
All right.